I signed Scott Mercer's hiring form without reading it. That's the honest start. Carol brought the payroll file, same as every Tuesday, and I went through it the way I'd gone through 4,000 mornings of paperwork. Name, date, signature, done. She left. I filed it. Then I pulled it back out. No reason I could name. Just did. Looked at the name again. Scott Mercer. Vanessa's husband. Working in my accounts department for 3 weeks already, apparently. And I was the last to know. I called Carol back in, asked when the hire was confirmed. 3 weeks ago, she said. Dale approved it. I said okay, in the voice I use when I'm not okay. Picked up my thermos. Already cold, drank it anyway. Kept my face exactly where it was. Before I tell you the rest, if stories like this are worth your time, a like and subscribe to Family X Revenge means more than you'd think. Now let me tell you how we got here. My name is Raymond Holt. I own a construction firm. That sentence used to feel like something I had to prove. It doesn't anymore most days. Holt Construction started with a 200 bathroom renovation and my father's tape measure. He gave it to me the year I started, 1987 Stanley, the kind with a belt clip and a corner that got bent sometime in the 90s. I never replaced it. It's in my jacket pocket right now. The same jacket pocket it's been in for 31 years. Some things you keep because they work. Some things you keep because of what they cost. I built the firm the way you build anything worth having, slowly, with bad knees and early mornings and 1 month, where I wasn't sure I could make rent. Vanessa knew about that month. She referenced it later. That's a different part of the story. What you need to know first is Gerald Caldwell, Vanessa's father, retired bank manager. The kind of man who shakes hands at parties and says reasonable things in a reasonable tone and makes you feel afterward like you said something slightly wrong without being able to identify what. He shook my hand the first time I came to their house. I'd worn my only suit, which I now understand he noticed, and said, "Vanessa mentioned you're in construction." Not a question, an assessment. I smiled. Told him it was my own work. Thought that dinner went well. Vanessa told me months later he'd asked her afterward if I was stable. I didn't think much about that word until much later. That was a habit of mine, not thinking about things until much later. It cost me. Here's what 9 years looked like I worked. The firm grew. 31 employees now, 2 active commercial projects, a third breaking ground in the spring, and somewhere in those 9 years, Gerald Caldwell convinced my wife, who had married me against her parents' wishes, who had genuinely loved me at the start, that she had settled. That the life we were building wasn't the life she deserved. She believed him. That's the part that still sits somewhere I can't quite reach. I found Dale at the site Wednesday lunch. His truck, my thermos, the kind of conversation we'd been having for 11 years, short, practical, ending before it needed to. I asked him directly, "Scott Mercer, did you bring him in?" He looked at me the way Dale looks at things he's about to say plainly. "Gerald Caldwell gave me the referral." "Figured you knew." He said it the way you say something obvious, because to Dale it was. I took out the tape measure, measured a doorframe that had been measured twice already that week. Dale watched. Didn't ask why. He knows when not to. That evening I called Gerald for the first time in 9 years. He picked up on the second ring. Raymond. Controlled. Not surprised enough to be genuinely surprised, if that makes sense. I said Scott's name. He said yes, he gave the referral. Scott was reliable. Then, and this is the part I keep coming back to, he asked how my work was going. Same tone he'd used at every family dinner for 9 years. Like we were still at his table. Like nothing had changed and nothing needed to. I hung up without answering. I want to tell you I felt angry driving home. I did. But underneath the anger was something worse. Gerald had asked that question like he was checking on me. Like he still had that right. And some part of me, some part I'm not proud of, had been waiting 9 years for him to ask. That part answered before I could hang up. Just not out loud. 3 days after that call, I stood in the hallway outside the accounts office. Glass partition. Scott at his desk, numbers on screen, coffee beside him, on time, competent, doing exactly what I was paying him to do. I watched for maybe 45 seconds, kept walking. That night I sat in my truck outside the office with the engine running and thought about things I'm not going to pretend I didn't think about. Small procedural things. Ways to make a job harder without it looking like anything. I sat there for a while. Then I drove home. I want to be straight with you about those 3 days. I didn't handle them well. I thought about doing things I'd have been ashamed of. I did one of them, I'll get to that. The other ones I talked myself out of, which I'm telling you not because it makes me look good, but because it's accurate. I almost became something I wouldn't recognize. I pulled Scott's full hiring paperwork through Carol. Everything clean. Gerald's referral noted as a personal recommendation to Dale. Standard process. Nothing irregular on any page. I asked Carol if there was anything I should know. She said not that she could see. I said okay. There wasn't anything there. Gerald had done nothing wrong on paper. This was the problem with Gerald. He never did anything wrong on paper. The one thing I did that I'm not proud of, I opened Scott's performance review file at the end of the month and changed the completion date forward by 4 weeks. No reason documented. Just changed it and saved it. Scott came to my office door 20 minutes later. Is there an issue with my review? I told him it was process. He said okay and left. I reopened the file. Completed it that afternoon. Fair, accurate, no issues. Submitted it same day. 4 hours total. I'm the only one who knows about those 4 hours. Now you do. A week later, Dale mentioned. The way Dale mentions things, like he's completing a sentence he started somewhere else, that Gerald had attended Owen's birthday party at Vanessa's house. Scott was there. Gerald had told him about it. I asked Dale why he was telling me now. He said he figured I already knew. Same line. Second time. I realized then that I had spent 11 years assuming the people around me knew the important things. I never asked. They assumed I knew. Nobody asked anything. That's how Gerald got so deep into my world without me noticing. Then Dale came back for a clipboard he'd forgotten. He saw I hadn't moved. He said my name once. I asked him, and I'm aware this sounds like something a man with better judgment wouldn't ask, whether Gerald had ever said anything about my work. Dale was quiet for a second. He said Gerald had told him I built the firm well. Then he picked up the clipboard and left. I stood in that parking lot for 11 minutes. I checked the time after. I'd been waiting 9 years for Gerald Caldwell to say I'd done something right, standing in my own parking lot. Still waiting, Owen texted me on a Saturday afternoon while I was waiting in the truck for his pickup. Just, what's that building called? The one you showed me. I'd taken him to Holt Building for the weekend before. Foundation to roof. The one that broke ground the year he was born. An hour of technical questions I was genuinely glad to answer. He'd said this is cool. At the end in the way 16-year-olds say things are cool when they actually mean it. I texted back Holt Building 4. He said, cool name. I put the phone down, drank cold coffee. I'm telling you I counted that exchange. I know I shouldn't. I counted it anyway. It was the first time he'd reached out first in longer than I want to admit. That same week Vanessa called about Owen's schedule. She does this professionally, correctly. The way two people manage logistics when they've decided everything else is done. At the end of the call there was a pause that I recognized from our marriage. Both of us waiting for the other to say what we actually meant. Neither of us did. She mentioned Scott had told her my review process was slow. I said it was process. She said okay. Call ended. I sat with the phone for a minute after. We'd been doing that our whole marriage, both of us waiting for the other one to go first. I used to tell myself that was her fault, or Gerald's, or the distance between what we'd expected and what we'd built. I don't think that anymore. I was in that silence too. I kept choosing it. That doesn't excuse what she said. It just means I was also in the room. My plan, if you can call it that, was Owen. The site visit. The building named after the year he was born. That was it. That was the whole plan. Carol asked for speech notes 2 weeks before the annual project completion dinner. I told her I'd speak from there. She asked if there was anything specific I wanted covered in the program. I told her one thing, my father's tape measure. 1987. That was the whole thing. She wrote it down. Looked at me the way Carol looks at things she's decided not to question. The dinner was 40 people team, subcontractors, vendors, accounts department. Scott would be there. I didn't plan the speech for Scott. I want to be clear about that. I planned it because I'd never once stood in front of the people who built this firm with me and said where it came from. 11 years, and I'd never said it out loud. The dinner was in a rented hall downtown. Carol had organized it, flowers on the tables, the firm's project photos on a slide loop in the corner. I got there early and walked the room once before anyone arrived. 40 chairs. I found mine at the front. When it was time, I went to the podium and kept it short. I told them about the 4,200 bathroom renovation. The first subcontract 11 years ago. I told them I'd used my father's tape measure. He'd given it to me the year I started, and I'd carried it since. I took it out of my jacket pocket and set it on the podium, bent corner and all. I told them the firm came from that tape measure, and from every one of them. And that was the truth, so there wasn't much else to say. 40 people clapped. I looked up once, toward the back. Scott Mercer was clapping with everyone else. I don't know what he was thinking. I decided that night I didn't need to. Owen arrived after Vanessa's drop-off. He walked into the empty hall while I was stacking chairs. He said Carol had streamed it and he'd watched. I asked if he'd actually watched. He said yeah. Then he was quiet for a second and asked if the tape measure had been Grandpa Gerald's. I set down the chair I was holding. No, I told him. My dad's. He said, oh. Then he picked up a chair and started stacking. We worked for maybe 10 minutes without talking. It wasn't the silence we usually had, the kind with things in it neither of us wanted to name. This one was different. Something had moved. I couldn't tell you what exactly. I didn't try to name it. I just kept stacking chairs next to my son in an empty room. And that was enough for that night. Vanessa called the next morning while I was still in the truck in my own driveway. Owen had told her about the tape measure. She asked if it was really my father's. I said yes. She said she hadn't known that. I said I know. The call ended shortly after. It wasn't an apology, I want to be honest about that. It was information she didn't have, she genuinely hadn't known. And I genuinely had never told her. 9 years of marriage, and I'd talked about contracts and square footage, and whether we could afford the kitchen renovation. I hadn't talked about my father, or the tape measure, or why I kept it bent. That's on me. It doesn't change what she said when she left. Both things can be true. Here's what I carry now, 3 things. And I'm not going to dress them up, Dale. We still work together. Feffy 4-7 a.m. calls, site issues, the same 11 years of shorthand. Professionally, nothing has changed. Personally, there's a careful quality to it now. Both of us aware of what the other knows, neither of us naming it. I notice it every morning. I think he does too. We've decided, without discussing it, that what we have is worth more than that conversation. Owen asked me a question at dinner 8 months ago. Then why didn't you do something? And I picked up a blueprint and told him to finish his food. He never asked again. I've started forming an answer 3 times since. I don't finish it. The question lives in the space between us, which I know isn't fair to him. I'm still working on the answer. Some answers take longer than they should. Gerald. This is the one I keep coming back to. No dramatic moment happened. No confrontation where he understood what he'd done. He's retired. Sunday lunches continue at Vanessa's house. Owen there, Scott there, Gerald there. He told Dale I built the firm well. He gave Scott a referral because he thought it was helpful. In his mind, he was never wrong about anything. He'll die believing he did right by his daughter, and I've made my peace with that. On most days. What I got was this: I put my father's tape measure on a podium in front of 40 people, and I said where I came from, and for 10 minutes afterward, I stacked chairs next to my son. I'm not going to tell you that's justice, because I don't think it is. I'm not going to tell you it was enough, because some days it isn't. But it was true, and it was mine, and Gerald Caldwell had nothing to do with it. Tuesday. 3:30 a.m. Scrambled eggs. Owen isn't here, but I make them anyway. Thermos filled. Tape measure in my jacket pocket, same bent corner, still not replaced. At the door. Owen's site visit jacket on the hanger. He left it last weekend. I straighten it. Adjust it on the hook. Lock the door. Truck. Engine. 23 minutes to site. Radio off. The road is straight. I drive. If this story meant something to you, I'd be grateful for a like and a subscribe to Familix's Revenge. It's how these stories reach people who need them. Thanks for listening.